Critical Role! Campaign 4, Season 2. Episode recap, my thoughts, analysis, and reaction. Where do I think things are going to go? And has it lived up to the hype? Is it actually good or great or something in between? Let's talk. The opening of this episode was a little bit controversial, I guess, as a cold open. Like, have you ever seen Saturday Night Live? With a flashback to the Falconers' rebellion of several characters fighting desperately in a hopeless battle. Thjazi almost killed before, of all people, Casimir, the person who we have not seen make an appearance yet as an NPC. Where the deuce is Casimir? Was Casimir the betrayer? Are we foreshadowing there? And it really sets the bonds that we sort of saw elaborated in the first episode, as well as sort of setting the table for how long these political conflicts have actually been simmering, smoldering, and finally erupting. Then we get back to the present day. The mask and the coffin drop. Yeah, the coffin drop. I'm going there. But no, this mask and this coffin, this was a book-ended episode of that. And this is by far and away the most interesting thing. I don't care who you are, what you are, or what your opinion is. This is my opinion, and I'm sticking to it, that the coffins, the celestials, and the demons are by far and away going to play such a massive role. We're lore dropping. The lore dropping that Brennan is doing on an episode basis is by far and away, in this star-studded, voice-acted soap opera D&D, overwhelmingly the best part, period. When you are describing the coffins, the runes of the halfling angel of death, that's amazing. And then it bookends it at the other side of things with the discovery of not just a regular-sized angel, but a 30-freaking-foot angel using a magical device that they call the prismatic retort. The Halavars are literally torturing a celestial being for its power, blood, milk, whatever you want to call. And, Wick is just walking around wearing the stuff, the white stuff that he's been plastered with on his face as the source of power. And this is, the biggest lore drop of Campaign 4. Now, if you actually spoiled it, unfortunately, in the character background lore that came out prior to the campaign, you knew that this was that. If you went into this going without that, though, this was potentially really, really big. Okay, so what else, recap-wise? Taisha breaks the mask, right, to open the episode. Don't touch magical things. This is the bar that Brennan has set of magical stuff, bad stuff, and it's going to happen together. Too often are we whimsy and fancying, just kind of doing and ad-libbing whatever we want in a D&D game, and now there are actual consequences. Actually, not really, because there really haven't been anything. We haven't even seen nary hardly any rolls whatsoever. We have not really seen combat at all. We will have combat at the beginning of episode 3, going up in the crow's nest, but apart from that, it's relatively been lore, character interactions, relationships, subverting all of the covert sort of machinations going on in the background, trying to understand those, instead of the crash, bash, smash, and everything else that we're usually used to. Then we dig into the emotional fallout, obviously, of the wake. Thimble still, I said mourning, Thjazi, blaming Valis still a little bit. The missing Sone of Night song, and the pointed now of the magical forgery, who did it, and who was good enough to swap it with that type of magic, especially knowing, again, at the end of the episode, this drop of, you know what, we're trying to essentially get your fascism going strong in the city, and you can study magic and practice magic without actually practicing magic. So who subbed it out, right? It's a common example of the fascist rules for thee, but not for me. So who of the big houses, I'm assuming at this point, dropped the magical forgery of this glyph into Thjazi rather than the original? What is going to happen of that? And that goes back to Casimir, who is the Crow Keeper thief, and Sid, who's Thjar's brother. These are the unknowns. These are obviously the directions that the table is heading for of who's going to be going after one and who's going to be going after the other. We talked about Loza retiring. Thjor is obviously then going to be positioned not only just as a warrior, voice cracking right there, but also as a political player that we were maybe not expecting the person to be, even though some of the other ones are both obvious and both obviously not. Cadigan, I'm sorry, probably not going to be a huge political player. Cue 10 episodes later when he's like leading, anyway, a house. Thjor impressing Wick, and Yanessa basically not buying this one bit. So again, it speaks to the levels of household that we get foreshadowed in this part of the episode, and Wikiboy's revelation at the end of the episode, but that Thjor's got to be removed. So who's going to do the removing? How direct? How hands-on? Do we getting a little bit PvP? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt we're going to get PvP, but it would be interesting to see if we actually did. Okay, and obviously that plays into the end of the episode with Halavar and Taconis manipulating the holy authority, the assassination, as well as the magical control of the city all in one. And we get introduced to a little bit of the Einfasen household in the same sense, with Zune meeting the man who is incredibly hungry for authority and power. So again, that's fine. We haven't seen much with that. Sir Julian also, with a little interaction with his dad, which is fine. Again, get Octus into the picture and somehow use him as a pawn rather than we actually care about him, which is fine. So that part was definitely the lackluster part of the episode. I mean, again, it's setting up some of these dynamic relationships, but at this point, I'm also not as invested or caring about it either as a whole. I'm sure that will change, but we'll see. Lastly, we got to go back to the after hours between Bolaire and Murray. Going back to the coffin and, well, the coffin drop, like I said, in the sense that they dropped the tool and never heard anything hit. And Bolaire's kind of like, well, maybe we should get something alive to throw in there. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. We'll just throw a familiar in there. Haven't we met 2 familiars already? Oh, just kidding. But again, what is the letter to Bolaire from Thjazi also going to impart? And how does Bolaire's, well, some almost mimicked mask of black in this to begin with going to be tied in? Is Bolaire going to take on the Angel of Death persona? Are we going to see more integration into the Celestial side in that way, or the Halfling side, or the Angel of Death in general? Again, by far and away, the most interesting from a lore as well as episodic perspective, without a doubt. The other thing I just have to point out is anyone else listening to this and going, how many dirty as well as just natural 20s are we hitting in an episode? I feel like it's sort of skewing the mean one way. We've had very little failures in general and incredibly high rolls, but their stats are statted out per the character sheets that were thrown out before the campaign. Really, really, really strong, even at a low level, which is kind of insane, which makes me wonder what some of their actual skills and traits are spec'd out too when they're getting, it seems like significant plus bonuses to every single role that seems to be their strongest in that way. I like it, but there has been little consequence except for the touching of the mask in terms of roles so far. This episode definitely suffered from a lack of pincushion and Wolfie though. I want to see more of the familiars. You've got something interesting set up when, you have the druid trying to animal speak to Wolfie and basically being rebuffed, essentially, right? It goes back to what I said at the beginning of Brennan setting this magical situation that is going to have ramifications when you're trying to do stuff that maybe you think you can just get away with without any consequences like my kids do. Also, we didn't see any reference to the shadow thing that leached onto Sir Julian in the first episode, so don't forget about that. I think that's going to be one of those little Easter eggs that is going to be called back to in like half a dozen episodes or more. That is stuff that is being put in place, being sewn into the fabric of the background that is meant to make you forget about it. So when it does come back up, you're going to look at that callback and go, oh, he's like Oda from One Piece, going back 700 episodes or chapters, and it all made sense. It was all done for a reason. So I think Brennan has a lot of this stuff mapped out, so much more detailed. And again, I guess we'll end this, session talking about just the fact that he's able to throw all these NPCs and all of this lore together, and I can't wait to see what else he has in store, especially the NPC face. Ooh, that kind of goes along with all of them as well. So I kind of really like that. He's still killing it. And let me put this at the end point. This is an example so far for me personally of do not tell, show. I do not need plot being spoon-fed to me constantly. I like being able to put the pieces together myself. I do not like being just told everything all at once. Well, this is what happened, and then this. No, you need to pay attention to everything Brennan puts in there, because he puts these little dots together that just sort of get missed if you're really not closely hearing what he is saying, not just passively watching or listening. And so again, I think you're going to see a lot of things unveiled and unrolled in that way as the series progresses. So overarchingly, again, I think it was bookended very, very, very well, but there were definitely some dry points in there, like I said. Sir Julian, again, I'm interested to see where it goes. Super bitter. Gonna be, setting up the redemptive story already in that way. I mean, again, I'm hoping that they subvert that trope in the first place. And I'm really hoping, as weird as this sounds, for a player character death, so we can kind of see some ramifications and, maybe second characters coming around dealing with that. I'm also not as invested in his character. I'm not invested in the druids yet. I mean, we get the alluded to the old path sort of being there and the gods trying to stomp it out. But the definitions and the splattering of who can do what magic and who can't is very ambiguous, and it makes me not as connected to those characters as I am with the house named characters and the very, very, very adjacent Thjazi characters, as well as the I've touched magical object characters, even Valus, who really was kind of absent for a huge portion of this episode, as well as one of the standouts of episode 1. So I was a little disappointed by that too. So there you go. My thoughts. Episode 2, let me know what you think. Comments, questions, concerns down below. Peace out, stay classy, sub if you want.